Mark was sure he had committed the perfect crime. He emptied the family accounts, took tens of thousands of dollars, and walked out to be with his mistress, leaving his wife and daughter with nothing. He thought he was leaving behind a helpless, crying 13-year-old girl. 3 weeks later, his career would crumble, his accounts would be frozen, and his face would be splashed across the news. And he never even suspected that the person who pulled the trigger was sitting at the kitchen table doing her homework.
Chapter 1. I'm doing what I should have done years ago. Mark was shoving shirts into the suitcase so fast and carelessly, it seemed like he was afraid he might change his mind if he paused even for a second. His movements were jerky, awkward, as if he were slapping himself with every crumpled piece of fabric. He didn't look up, and that needle-like silence hurt more than any words. I felt less like a person and more like some random piece of furniture. A stool by the window, an old coat rack long overdue for the dump. The second decade of our marriage ended not with a conversation, not with closure, but with the screech of a zipper sealing a blue suitcase. That sound was louder than any confession. "What are you doing?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. My voice trembled like a girl who just asked something stupid and knows it. He finally looked up. His eyes were empty, like the gray winter sky over our yard in February, when the sun doesn't show for weeks. No guilt, no regret, only indifference, like this wasn't about us, but some neighbor's fight he'd accidentally walked into. "Je pars aujourd'hui, Claire. I'm leaving today, Claire." I blinked, trying to summon last night in my memory. We'd been at the table, talking about Emma's college applications. Her math grades were excellent, but she was drawn to literature. Mark nodded, kissed me on the forehead, and said, "She'll be fine." It had all seemed so normal, so routine, like life would just keep going. And now, a suitcase and a door. "Is there someone else?" I asked quietly, as though the volume of my voice might change his answer. He shrugged. The motion was short, almost lazy. "It's not about someone else. It's about me needing to breathe again." And almost casually, he added, "Transfer my half of the savings to my account." I felt something crack inside. Downstairs, the laptop was still open. I nearly ran down the stairs, tripping over the rug that always bunched up like an accordion and drove me crazy. I opened the screen. Current account, $247.83. Savings, $0. Emma's education fund, where we'd been saving for 12 years. $0 3 days ago, while I was at book club discussing our latest novel, he'd emptied everything. Everything. My mouth went dry. I remembered my childhood. My father slamming the door, throwing my mother's sweater on the floor, and disappearing. I was 9. Back then, I thought it was my fault. I must have said something wrong, done something wrong. The sharp scent of men's cologne mixed with my mother's screaming stayed with me forever. Since then, every door slam feels like a hammer to the temples. Upstairs, Mark stomped down the stairs like a marching band. The suitcase banged against the steps, underlining the moment. Final act, curtain down. He dragged it past us, past me and Emma, with the air of someone moving past unnecessary decor. "Explain to your daughter," I exhaled, "why you're abandoning her." Emma stood barefoot, holding a bowl of cereal. In that second, she looked oddly grown up, as if someone had aged her 10 years in an instant. Mark tossed over his shoulder, "You'll understand when you're older." And the door clicked shut, quietly, almost politely. That's how people leave when they've rehearsed it. No drama, just routine, so they can later say, "I didn't yell, I simply left." We were alone now. I looked at Emma and felt my heart fall into some deep void where there was no bottom. Her eyes were dry. "Is he coming back?" she asked. I shook my head. "I don't think so." "Did he take the money?" I nodded. The words stuck in my throat like nails. Emma said nothing. She carried her bowl to the sink, rinsed it, dried it, and put it away. That gesture was more terrifying than any crying or shouting. There was a grown-up resolve in it I hadn't expected. She turned to me and said calmly, almost playfully, "Don't worry, Mom. I've got this." And in that moment, I heard the echo of my own childhood in her voice. But where I had blamed myself and stayed silent, she didn't. She chose to speak. Chapter 2. The house didn't just become empty. It seemed to start watching. In every wall I heard reproach. In every object, a question. I caught myself talking to empty rooms, asking the armchair where its owner had gone, asking the cup why it remained while he left. Even the curtains looked frozen, tense, as if they knew more than they dared to say. Sometimes I'd purposely tug them, hoping to hear at least the rustle of fabric. It was the only answer left. I didn't cry in sobs, but with quiet domestic grief in everyday moments, at the sink, washing his shirts, which now smelled only of detergent, not him. During calls to the bank, when the cold voice droned, "Your balance is," and each time that phrase rang like mockery. When I was a child, I hated cliches like, "Dad is busy," or "He's tired." There was always something bigger hidden behind them, but I was too small to understand. Emma lived by routine, as if nothing had changed. 7:15. In the kitchen, breakfast, backpack packed. A quick, "Bonne journée, maman." I often watched her back as she closed the door behind her, and I saw in her that little girl I once was. The girl who tried to smile at her mother even after the door slammed and her father went away. Back then, I thought, if I smile harder, maybe he'll come back. Now I knew. He wouldn't. At night, I heard the steady tapping of her keyboard through the wall. Not a chaotic gaming spree, but a calm, measured rhythm. Tap, pause, tap, pause. Like a metronome, like a heart refusing to skip beats. Sometimes I smiled, imagining she was writing a novel in which the heroine saved the world, and thought, well, at least someone in this family might become a writer. But more often, the cold crept over me. Such determination sounded too mature. One evening, I served her dinner on a tray, chicken and potatoes. She, without looking up, snapped the laptop shut. "What are you doing?" I asked, trying to give my voice lightness. "History, Industrial Revolution." Her answer came too fast, too calm. For a half second, yes, I saw it. The mail-client interface, not a school essay. I laughed, too loudly to hide my fear. How thoughtful of me, feeding a future historian potatoes and chicken while she saves the world from steam engines. Emma only snorted and returned to her keys. On Friday, while I was clearing her textbooks from the table, I found a printout under one of them. On the pages, his name, Mark, and next to it, Rebecca Laurent, his colleague from the wealth management firm. The dates of the letters, 3 weeks before he left. Hotels, short phrases, cold instructions, how to deal with Claire when the time comes. I felt my throat tighten as if someone had inserted an ice stone inside. "Where did this come from?" I exhaled. Emma closed her bedroom door slowly, as if she had rehearsed the gesture. She looked so grown up that I almost forgot her age. "Dad's sloppy with passwords. He never logs out." She reached under the mattress and pulled out a thick notebook. Inside, her notes, screenshots, prints, diagrams, phone number lists. A real dossier. "He uses the same password everywhere," she said. "He doesn't clear his search history." I checked everything, transactions, emails, and his second phone. I pressed my palm to my temple. In that moment, I saw in her not a child, but a woman, younger than me by 20 years, yet with eyes clear and hands that knew what they were doing. Rebecca handles clients' trust accounts, and for 2 years now, the two of them have been siphoning money. "Emma, that's illegal." She narrowed her eyes and, for the first time in a long while, half smiled, dryly, without warmth. "Stealing from your own daughter, that too." I had no words. She handed me the printout. It showed the numbers, $75,000, withdrawn by his hand from her account. I remembered how, when she was 7, we used to carry coins together to drop into a translucent jar, and she'd exclaim happily, "That's for my education." Now the jar was empty, and the screen only showed zeros. Emma opened the notebook. Among the pages, spreadsheets, ledgers, fake invoices, irregularities in reports. Everything neatly compiled and signed. "I'm collecting, documenting, tearing their lies down piece by piece," she said. "I've got everything backed up." I sat on her bed. Funny. Once she hid a stuffed bear under the mattress, now she hid a dossier on her own father. The bear was lost, but the fear remained, and Emma turned it into a weapon. "Don't worry, Mom," she said, returning to the keyboard. "I'm handling it." The keys danced again like tiny hammers. Their rhythm reminded me of raindrops on the roof of my childhood home when Mama cried into her pillow, thinking I was asleep. And I counted the beats, believing that one day the rain would end. Days later, Mark faced a real storm. Not in newspapers, not on TV, not the kind spread by corridor gossip, but a far more personal storm, raging in his strangled voice over the phone. "Claire, something's wrong." He was choking on his words, like a swimmer suddenly pulled down by a cold whirlpool. "The banks, they froze all my accounts, and Rebecca was escorted out of the office this morning." I looked out the window. Outside, a thin rain was sliding down the glass, leaving slanted streaks like the lines of a poorly written letter, scribbled by a tired student. I could have pitied him in another life, if we were different people, but now his words sounded like a bad rehearsal. He was still playing a part whose audience had long left. Emma quietly sat across from him. She opened her laptop. The familiar glow of spreadsheets and charts flickered on. The screen, she looked so calm, as if she were solving algebra problems, though to me it seemed this was no longer algebra, but the highest mathematics of adult life. The pale light traced the lines of her face, and I suddenly saw not a child, but my peer. "Just got an alert from your phone," Mark stuttered. "Someone accessed my mail." I shrugged. "Report it to the police." In childhood, I'd already heard similar words. My father, too, had defended himself before my mother with cliches. "It was an accident. It's not what you think." I just had a different path. Then I thought I was to blame. Smiled at the wrong time, asked a wrong question, looked wrong. I counted heartbeats while Mama cried behind the wall. 1, 2, 3, up to 10. I believed that on the 10th he'd return, but the door never opened. And now, it didn't open either. Mark spoke about whistleblowers, about law, about truth surfacing illegally. I listened and understood. He was confusing justice with betrayal, protection with cover-up. Chapter 3. I closed my eyes and remembered summer, how he taught Emma to ride a bicycle. He ran beside her, held the handlebars, and said, "The most important thing, keep your balance." Back then, he smiled easily, widely. That same voice now sounded different, not supportive, but defensive. "It was an investment. I would have paid you back," Rebecca's father insisted. The opportunity arose. The same words uttered over and over, always meaning the same thing. "I'm leaving." Emma reached out and calmly picked up the phone. Her voice held no trembling, no anger. "Dad," she said calmly, "you stole 75,000 euros from me. You used my social security number for loans. You registered that house down south while thinking we were too ignorant to check." Silence hung on the line. I counted to 10, just like when I was a child, and still nothing changed. "Emma," Mark broke, voice wavering. "Where did you get this from?" "I saw everything," she answered. "The second phone, the fake accounts, the missed calls. And I know this too. Rebecca blocked your number, and her father got the dossier and publicly disowned her." I saw Emma's lip twitch. Not a smile, but bitter, mature irony. She'd learned his lessons about diligence and attention, and now she used them against him. "I love you." Mark's voice dropped almost to a whisper. I'll make everything right. Just stop. Emma lowered her gaze to the keyboard. Actions have consequences. You taught me that. She paused. Remember? When you left with that suitcase. She hung up and returned to her laptop. The keys began to tap again. Steady, without pause, like rain on a rooftop. That sound used to alarm me. Now it felt like music. My child isn't hiding. She's acting. I booked Emma a session with a psychotherapist, Dr. Patricia Reeves. Her name sounded strict, almost cold, and she turned out to be a soft-spoken woman, always seeming to hurry not forward, but toward something, with eyes that saw through walls. In the file, it was written, specialization, family trauma, gifted children. The two words, trauma and gifted, always seemed to me incompatible, like rust and gold. But apparently, in our family, they had grown inseparable. We came into her office on a rainy afternoon. Damp air clung to my hair, and I shook my head at the door instinctively, like a dog after a walk. Emma went in first, confident, almost as if she owned the place. I thought, in a little while, she really could sit in that chair not for therapy, but to receive others. The room was oddly cozy, walls decorated with ocean view posters, a small table with a lamp under a cloth shade, giving soft, evening-like light. The smell was unusual, a mix of coffee, vanilla, and something else, reminding me of the gym from my childhood. I caught myself thinking, maybe I'd like to stay even for an hour. Sit in that chair and just exhale. Emma spoke first, without emotion, calmly, as if narrating a newspaper piece, not her father's betrayal. Each word was precise, like a row in her spreadsheets, neat, exact, economical. When the therapist asked, "What did you feel in that moment?" Emma answered in a way that made my mouth go dry. Satisfaction. That was justice. I turned away as though I had dropped something into a bag. Inside me flickered a memory. A long corridor, cold floor under bare feet, a slamming door. Mom was crying in the kitchen, pretending everything was fine. And me thinking, probably it's my fault. Maybe I didn't pick up my toys, didn't say thank you at the right time, didn't live up to expectations. Back then, I believed justice meant his return. But he didn't come back, and he never would. Dr. Reeves paused, as though choosing her words between breaths. Reactions differ. Some children break apart. Others take control. Your daughter, Claire, she belongs to the second group. The question is, are you okay with who she's becoming? I forced a strained smile, though inside, I felt a knot tightening. The girl from the past, the one who fell apart, nodded. See, I couldn't cope, but Emma, my Emma, gathered those fragments and built a fortress. Sometimes I thought her walls were too high. Would I be able to reach inside, even if I wanted to? Chapter 4, Final Version, edited for clarity and flow. At home, Emma pulled a booklet from her backpack. Digital Security for Families. A thick brochure with a colorful diagram on the cover. Checklists, flowcharts, tips, a full toolkit for protection. She flipped through it while explaining how to detect scams, spot fakes, and store passwords safely. I listened, thinking, at her age, I thought independence meant cooking pasta without turning it into glue. And even that was hit or miss. The school wants me to speak at the PTA, Emma said, and I nearly choked on my tea. I immediately pictured the school gym, rows of adults with serious faces, ready to argue about uniforms and field trip costs, and my daughter, calmly teaching them how to avoid phishing. Part of me wanted to laugh at the absurdity. Another part wanted to cry with pride. You're not nervous? I asked. She shrugged. A little. But most mistakes happen when people don't know what to watch for. In that moment, I realized. She spoke with the same calm confidence Mark once had. But while he taught us to close our eyes, she teaches us to keep them open. Maybe that's what real strength looks like. Seeing clearly when others would rather not. The Rebecca Laurent case had exploded into a national scandal. First, there were short blurbs in local papers, a few lines buried between weather updates and bus schedules. Then came tense reports on TV, anchors in practiced tones, red arrows on charts, lawyers and victims on screen. Soon, it was everywhere. National broadcasts, debates, politicians acting shocked. More names each week. Families, hidden accounts, suspicious transfers. It was like someone flipped over a giant rug and exposed the tangled mess beneath. The anonymous source, as the media called them, had compiled a flawless dossier. Numbered, organized, confirmed. Even from the sidelines, I felt like I was reading a textbook on how to expose fraud. At the library, my usual escape from worry, the smell of old books brought back childhood. One day, a young journalist approached me. Sharp eyes, a notebook gripped like a weapon. Her question was bold, confident, like she expected truth. I looked straight at her and said nothing, and that silence said more than words ever could. It echoed like my childhood. After my father left, my mother didn't scream. She cleaned, folded laundry, and stayed silent. That quiet weighed heavier than shouting. I learned then that silence could be the loudest sound of all. At home, Emma responded like she was reviewing homework, not confessing to taking down a fraud ring. They won't trace it to me. I used proxies and anonymized channels. What matters is, now other families are speaking out. No ego, no pride. Just steady, mature clarity. I thought, the word matters shouldn't sound so heavy coming from a 13-year-old. But maybe that was her strength, knowing what counts when I would have drowned in emotion. 3 weeks later, an email landed in her school inbox. Not a letter, just a formal notice. Secure Family invites you to join our youth talent program. I opened it and nearly spilled my coffee. A full university scholarship, plus a job offer after graduation with a $120,000 salary. At 13, I wanted a bicycle with streamers. My daughter was fielding six-figure offers. Emma barely glanced at the screen and shut the laptop. "I'll turn it down," she said, as if refusing broccoli at lunch. "They want to own what I build. They're monetizing fear." I didn't know what to say. Pride and worry collided in me. Proud that she had the guts to say no. Scared that she already knew too well how to weigh ethics against reward. She pulled out a crisp white business card from her backpack. Printed neatly, E. Patterson, Family Financial Protection Consultant. I couldn't help but laugh. The card looked more professional than many lawyers I knew. 6 clients, she said plainly. $75 an hour. I help people recover funds and protect their accounts. "You're 13, I whispered. She raised an eyebrow. "Online, competence matters, not age. It's all legal," and she said it with such calm. I could already see her future. A big office, glass walls, skyline views of Paris or New York. And me, just a memory from a childhood she outgrew too fast. Chapter 5. And yet, watching her spread those neat stacks of papers on the table, I caught myself thinking, perhaps what looked like emptiness to me, the absence of a husband, the fractures in our family, her stolen childhood, had already become her supports. "Mom, are you filing for divorce today?" she asked that evening while we sat at the table. The fork in her hand looked less like cutlery and more like a metal pen, outlining her future verdict. "Every day we wait gives him another chance to hide assets or take out new loans." Her voice was steady, without trembling, as though she had practiced this speech many times. Sometimes it felt like I was sitting across not from a 13-year-old girl, but from a stern lawyer in jeans and a messy ponytail. On the table beside her plate lay her notebook, its pages full of sober entries. Legal aid, contacts of notaries, filing deadlines. Her handwriting was neat, shamelessly adult, as if she practiced not in a school notebook, but on official forms. She had, long ago, taken over our household budget. She filed receipts in clear plastic sleeves sorted them by colored tabs. Red for unnecessary expenses, green for essentials, yellow for questionable ones. Sometimes I feared those printouts she brought home. Not because of the numbers, they were always small. That wasn't new. But because of the guilt embedded in those charts. The guilt of a woman who long believed miracles could change a husband and had burdened a child with what grown-ups should have handled. She drew up a plan. Cold, step by step, precise, like instructions on a medicine leaflet. I signed the papers. My hand shook. The ink spread into a tiny blot, and memory threw me back to childhood. My father walked out. My mother sat at the edge of the bed, signing some papers, ink spots barely visible on her white blouse. She cried so quietly, I thought the walls were crying instead of her. I decided then, if only I were quieter, better, got the words right, maybe he would have stayed. That thought grew in me for years like rust. And now, seeing my daughter taking on what I should have done, I saw the pattern repeat with a different tone. Where I had guilt, she had duty. Where there were tears, there was resolve. Where I had endless patience, there was action. Late that night, I passed her door and heard her voice. She was on a video call. The voice was soft, but firm, adult. It's not your fault. Adults are supposed to protect children. If they don't, we protect ourselves. I stopped. I didn't see who she was talking to. Maybe a friend? Maybe one of her invisible online contacts? But every word landed on me like water on parched earth. A stack of laundry slipped from my hands in the hallway. I wept. Not from grief, but from pride. My daughter, just 13, knew what it takes when I spent decades learning the hard way. That suffering is not the same as living. The irony bit deep. The mother who failed and the child who did. 6 months after everything happened, I was shelving books in the children's section at the library. The morning smelled of paper and glue from new editions. Somewhere in the corner, school kids rustled while picking comics, and the old fan on the windowsill hummed, pretending to move air. Sometimes I felt like the whole library was a giant ribcage. Its breath was the rustling pages and soft footsteps. I was straightening a row of fairy tales when my boss, a slender woman with glasses sliding down her nose, leaned close and whispered almost conspiratorially. The reporter asked again about Emma. Her eyes flashed a mix of curiosity and worry. I simply nodded, hiding the tremor in my hands behind thick covers. No matter how much time had passed, hearing my daughter's name on someone else's lips still felt like someone opening the door to a closet full of our most vulnerable secrets. That evening at dinner, I mentioned it carefully. Emma chewed her pasta and replied plainly, as if we were discussing a math test. No one will know it was me, but the more of us speak out, the more families will join. She said it with such certainty that I realized again. Sitting across from me wasn't a teenager in a hoodie with a rabbit on it, but a grown person who knows how to sort priorities and place words carefully. Adolescence sometimes doesn't come gradually. It snaps into place all at once, like spring buds bursting after winter. Her consultations grew. In the evenings, I'd peek into her room. Screens blinking, stacks of printed sheets neatly piled. She drafted free checklists, drew diagrams, arrows, and boxes. How to freeze activity at Banque de France, how to report to AMF, how to document fraud. Her notebooks had more entries than my mother's old cookbooks, only instead of salt and pepper, there were screenshots and notarized signatures. Sometimes I laughed, thinking that if my grandmother saw it, she'd swear Emma had played school too seriously. When I'm 18, I want to turn this into an association, she said one evening, removing glasses she only wore while working on the computer, to help people who can't afford legal defense. That's noble, I answered, trying not to show how tightly my heart clenched, between pride and fear. Then I remembered the spring of my childhood, bird cherry blossoms in the yard, and my father is skipping the school concert. I sat among classmates, waiting for the door to open. expecting him to walk in and smile. Instead, I watched other kids' fathers filming their daughters. I thought, if he didn't come, something was wrong with me. That whisper of guilt stayed inside me for years. So now, every word from Emma sounded like medicine, teaching not to blame, but to understand. Mom? She asked that night over mugs of cocoa. Do you think Dad feels sorry? I don't know, I admitted. Do you? She thought, dipped her spoon into the foam, then quietly said, feeling sorry? That's pity for consequences. Understanding? That's something else. I don't think he knows how to understand. I smiled. At 13, I knew only good and bad, love or abandonment. My daughter already understood responsibility shades, like a chess player moving pieces on a board. Next morning, everything looked ordinary. She padded in socks with holes at the heels, searched for a history textbook, and complained about gym class. And yet I knew. Beneath that teenage mess lived someone who had turned trauma into armor, for herself and for others. Ready for school? I asked, handing her a sandwich. Always, and I love you. I love you too. She slammed the door, too loudly, as always. I smiled. A loud door, also a sign of life. Betrayal didn't destroy us. It exposed what we're made of. Emma didn't just get justice. She earned a future for herself and for all she'll protect. Watching her walk away with her backpack, I realized spring had come. Not the calendar kind, the inner kind. And this was the best season of my life. Sometimes I wonder, did I get support not from the world, but by becoming the support myself? I'm ashamed to admit it, but perhaps sometimes the child becomes stronger than the adult. Emma carried what should have been my burden. And every time I see her standing firm, I feel warmth and fear all at once. I worry. Will this early maturity ever become too heavy a load to carry? Will there come a day when she wants to be just a girl and inside finds only a stoic guard of rules? I catch myself realizing that I expect more from her maturity than I managed myself, and that hurts, knowing I, an adult, failed to close the door in time, to strike the table, to simply say no. She did. I'm grateful to fate for her strength, but I keep asking myself, what mark will this leave on her soul? Will she ever learn to laugh till tears, to trust without checking every detail? Or did I, by losing my hold on the wheel, pass the helm too early? We seldom admit it, but maybe some of you have been through something similar. When children grow up faster than they're allowed, when you see in their eyes the tiredness that should belong to you. Not them. Share your story. I need to know we're not alone. That early strength doesn't have to turn into a lifetime scar. I regret not becoming a shield for my daughter when she needed it most, but maybe my weakness and her maturity will balance out over time. I hope so with all my heart.